how did you deal with that level of chaos? Because there's like some things that you did when I was reading the book that I just like cringed. Like the stuff when you were like in your parents' home when you found out they were away, and like, or when you saw the gay gentleman. There's a gay gentleman that you had punched. Right. Like, how did you? Like, I was just like, oh my god, the humanity is just like had escaped.
Yeah.
How did you get to that place? Because I guess that's a different level.
It was really just a matter of like being in constant flight of what just happened. Like whatever just happened 5 minutes ago, I gotta get away from it. I can't sit here literally and figuratively. I can't be here when everything comes shaken down, when the consequences of this arrive.
Right.
And I'd say that whether it was a crime I was committing and the consequences were the police coming, or, and really most powerfully, I can't escape my own inner consequences. Like throughout me, throughout that process, there's a human being inside of me who's going, what are you doing?
Right.
What is wrong with you? Like, this is horrible. You shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
And so I'm constantly trying to flee that voice. So the way I managed the chaos was to be constantly in motion, whether it was physically, emotionally, intellectually. No, I wasn't in an intellectual motion, that's for sure. But spiritually, I wasn't even thinking on those levels. I'm just trying to flee the intellectual and spiritual consequences of what I'm doing. And I'm always really tentative to even mention alcohol, because I never ever want to make it sound like I was just drunk. Like it's never an excuse. The alcoholism was, there's plenty of alcoholics on earth, plenty of alcoholics on earth. Like fortunately not many of them attack people because of the color of their skin.
Right.
But the alcohol was certainly a factor. That was part of my way of fleeing. I was constantly like numbing this inner voice that was saying, this is bad. So I'm like, oh, well, if I drink enough beer, then I'm not going to hear that voice anymore.
I was wondering because there's that voice that people have. When
absolutely.
When they do something bad and they know they're doing something bad and there's a consequence coming and they eventually have to deal with their inner voice and the consequence together.
Yep.
And I was wondering, I was like, if I put myself in your shoes, I was like, how could I live with just myself, just forget the consequences.
Right.
If I was doing this, because I know this voice would be there just ripping me apart.
Right.
And so it was alcoholism that allowed you to numb that.
The alcohol is a huge, huge part of it. That was my go-to. That was every day. It was basically like, how am I going to get beer? Where's the beer coming from? How much can I drink? And then how do I balance that with work, which is how I get more beer? Like that was really one of the biggest front and center concerns of mine. But another means of fleeing was delving into the ideology of white supremacy. I.e., there's a chapter in the book where I travel down south, and there's actually like a holiday in white supremacist circles called Martyrs Day, which is the day that a guy named Robert Matthews was killed by federal agents on Whidbey Island in Seattle.
Yeah, that guy died an insane death.
It was hardcore. Like it was him versus like about 100 federal agents who were all heavily. It was out of a movie, like straight up out of a movie.
And this dude, when he died, was burnt to a crisp, holding his rifle.
Exactly.
Like that is committed.
Well, it is. And that's real. That really happened.
Right.
Now, for me, in the way that would be a means of flight for me, is I would think of Robert Matthews and the sacrifice that he made, dying with his hands on his weapon and never giving up. Like, so in my head, I'm thinking like, I gotta be like this guy. But I knew damn well that I didn't really want to get in a firefight with federal agents, and I didn't want to. I didn't have the guts to take it that far. I don't know if guts is the right word, but Robert Matthews was certainly a different type of white supremacist than me. Robert Matthews didn't drink. He was like 100%
ideology,
mental clarity all the time, and he was so engulfed in the lies of white supremacy. He believed them to be true, and he was as hardcore as you get. But like going to a ceremony where we're swearing allegiance to the fight that he kicked off, and all these like, and at that ceremony I was relatively sober. Yeah. So it was the ideology combined with the alcohol, combined with the white power music, the fighting, the violence. That was all means of flight to not like sit and just dwell in what was happening and what I was doing and why I was doing it. I never wanted to answer any of those questions.
Yeah. How did you get out of it?
Exhaustion is the simple answer.
It wasn't even actually what you like. We got going back to what we said earlier. It wasn't even what you really. The ideology wasn't really what was motivating you.
Everywhere you looked, blew holes in the ideology. Like everything, especially the biggest driver of the exhaustion is when people who I claim to hate treated me with kindness. Yeah. And so the ideology says that there's this Jewish conspiracy to wipe the white race off the face of the earth. It's been going on for thousands of years. And as their greatest weapon against us are people of color. So black people, Latino people, Indian people, whoever. Anybody who's not white, they're here because of the Jews bringing them here. Mm-hmm. Like that, this is all like white power ideology 101. And when I had a Jewish boss who said I was a good kid just going through a phase rather than fire me for having a swastika on my jacket, that blew holes in this whole thing about how Jews are these horrible people. Like this guy is a human being, and he's a very honorable one to the point where he's like, yeah, whatever. I know. Go ahead. Yeah, you white power, Sikh, yeah. Just, you'll grow out of it. And this is someone who has family members who perished in the Holocaust. Like this is someone who had every reason to hate me and to fire me with a vengeance. And he didn't take that path. He took a path of humanity and demonstrated for me how human beings should treat each other. Yes. And that knowledge of that experience was just like this. It just added to the. If you picture like you're walking, actually, part of what we used to do this sometimes when we do talks, we'd bring a kid up to the front of the audience, and we'd put like a jug of water in their hand that was maybe full about like this, and Par would like slowly pour water in the jug, making it heavier and heavier while talking to the audience. Yeah. And as it gets heavy, you see this kid like, it's hard to keep it holding it up. And, and they get to a point where they're breaking. Yep. They can't hold it up anymore. Yep. And again, the reason of this exercise is to get the audience to be like, hey, why are you making him do that? Don't do that. Like, it's getting heavy. Can't you see he's struggling? Yep. For me, it was like I'm carrying around these jugs that are getting more and more full of water and weight. Right. And every time somebody treats me with kindness, that's like a huge addition to the weight that I'm carrying. Right. Till it gets to the point where I'm like, I can't carry the weight anymore. I just have to shed it.